Good afternoon. This is Tina. How are you doing? In this video, I'm gonna talk about auto wild. Okay. Some people probably are new to Spring and they kind of like confused about the auto wild annotation. So I'm gonna talk about. Okay. Hopefully, after watching this video, you understand when we should using auto wild. So let me give an example why we should using AutoWild in Spring MVC or other Spring projects. Probably you already used before. Suppose here we have let me change. Okay, let me change this one to here. Have a public. Suppose we have a public. Here I'm gonna using Spring MVC project, okay? As example, product controller. And here have annotation controller. What does this controller annotation used here do? Okay, because at runtime, as a programmer, we don't manually create the instance of product controller. We ask the Spring framework to create an instance for us. When we annotate the class using component-based annotation like a controller, component, service repository, at runtime, the framework, which is Spring MVC here, will create an instance for us to use, okay? And then suppose here I have a public get mapping method. Get mapping, which is the slash, okay? And here I have a string, which is get all the products. And here I have a model, okay? And inside here, I will return to the index page, and the index page you have a GSTO to loop for all the products information, okay? So now here I have a model M dot add attribute, okay? And here you are using what? Here you are using products, okay? And what's the value to retrieve? Okay, you have to give a product list here, right? Here you have to give a product list. Most likely we need to retrieve the product list from the repository, okay? And in the controller you will access the service, and the service will access the repository, and in order to retrieve the information from the database. And the service you will contains the business logic. Probably you change do some operations or business logic or rules checking on the information holded in the data. But here I just using some fake, okay? My service, I don't have to go to the repository. I just return a fake one. So here, most likely you're gonna program to interface, okay? So you can have multiple implementations, and you can switch between different product service. Okay, product service. And here we have one method. By default, the methods in interface is public and abstract. So you can just declare the return type product, and let's call this a generic get all. Okay, and let's provide our implementation. Public class product service import, and we will implements, right? Implements this product service. Okay, and here you have to provide the implementation to this product service method get all. And suppose here I return an array fake, okay, of as a list. And in this bracket, you create some new product here, okay, new product like a one mic or some other information, and you can create multiple, okay. So now, how in this product controller, where's my cursor here? Okay, in this product controller, I want to call the getAll method in the product service to retrieve all the products, right? What can you do? Suppose in your controller you have multiple methods, okay, like get mapping, post mapping, or other mappings, which we are also using other methods in the product controller. Most likely you're gonna do what? You're gonna have a product service, and let's call a service, okay, equals new product service import here. And here what you do, you're using service dot get all, right? You can do this way and it works fine, okay, it works. Oh, sorry, we don't have the semicolon because this one is in the argument. It works, but it's not good. And why it's not good? This part. Whenever we using new, okay, to create an instance, first you are not programmed to interface, you are programmed to the implementation. Because you can only new on the concrete class, you can new on the interface or abstract class to create an instance, right? And also, when using new, your product controller, okay, and this product service import are tightly coupled. Suppose later on you have another product service implementation, which is provide another set of the collection of the product, okay. Then if I want to using a product service import too, what I should do? You have to come to the product controller and change this piece of information, right? You have to modify the code, this one, to be a product service import second version. You have to do like this. If you have another one again, you have to change the code again. We always talk about principle. There's open for extension and close for modification. So modification here is really bad. And there's another case. Suppose later on you want to do the unit test or the integration test for the product controller. Whenever you using new, your unit test failed. Because now if we think about, okay, I want to test the get products, these methods, okay, and when you test this method, you should, when it fails, we should make sure the failing reason is only because of the code I wrote inside the product controller, right? But in the get products, you use the methods from the service, the get all. Suppose now your test case fail, you cannot guarantee your test case fail is not because of the get all method. There's no way you can change this. You can stop. You can or you can mock another guaranteed version, which is the product service implementation here. Because you're using new here, you have to always change the code, right? So this is not a good part. So to do that, we should make sure we're using dependency injection. Okay, so what is dependency injection? Let me revert all the things back. So we don't using new. One way to do a dependency injection, yes, you can do here. You can have a controller here. Or how can I make it move a little bit down? Select this piece. and I'm very smart. Okay, move it down. Okay, I have to move this one down a little bit. Okay, yeah. This one down a little bit. Hey, very good. Okay, and I move this one down. Yes, then have more space here, right? Okay, here. Indent is correct. So what you can do is this. Here you can do is have a public product controller, and then here have a product service and PS. Okay, product service, I'm lazy. This dot service equals PS, and for this piece information you can cross. Okay, but it is in this case, when you create an instance of product controller, you can inject, okay, you can provide a copy of the product service here. But for the Spring MVC project, as a programmer, we don't manually create instance of a product controller, because we ask the framework to take care of the life cycle of the product controller for us. And then when the Spring framework call product controller this constructor, how can it know where is the product service instance I can inject, right? You also need to tell Spring. How to do that? You add annotation service here. When you have a service here and the Spring MVC at runtime, it will also create an instance of the product service import for you. Okay, so when Spring create instance of a product controller, he will know, okay, I will inject this instance to here. Okay, and most of the time you can do is you add annotation. Let's using another color. You add annotation called auto wild here. But when using construct-based annotation, construct-based dependency injection, you don't need necessary to add the auto wild here. It will still works. Okay. So when you add auto wild, you are asking Spring, okay, to inject an instance of product service for you. Okay. And another way, most likely people will do, okay, we are using here. The dependent injection have three ways, okay, that's a problem. One is construct based, okay. One is construct based, which is like this way. Okay, you add auto wild, you have product controller, it will inject one product service, and how to inject? It will find the service annotation, okay, annotated on this product service import. It will know, okay, based on the type, based on this type, and here you implement this one, it will inject one. If you don't have this service annotation here, you will get non-point exception, because at runtime, Spring doesn't know what's the actual implementation for this type. This is construct based, okay. And the second one, which is widely used, called property based. What that mean? Suppose here is your product controller. Okay, you have a public class product controller, and you want to have instance of product service, right? Just add this auto wild product service and the product service, and you have other methods. What do they do? At runtime, when Spring trying to create an instance of product controller, he will scan all the fields which you annotated with auto-wild. Or when I say, okay, you add auto-wild this annotation on these fields, then Spring will trying to find an instance of this type and then assign value to this one. Okay, he will find an instance. You suppose you have a product service import, and that product service import must annotated with service annotation. Then at runtime, he will inject an instance to this product service, okay, this fields. Otherwise, you will get a non-point exception. This is a property-based dependency injection, and the last one is called a setter. You can using either of them in your Spring project. Okay, setter, which you have like this way, controller and the public class product controller. Okay, and you have a field which is product service. Okay, PS. When you just do like this way, Spring won't inject instance for you. So this one will be none. Okay, you will get a non-point exception. And the other way you can do is you can have a set method. Set PS. Okay, here you have a product service and PS, and here you have this dot PS equals PS, and you have to add auto-wild. Okay, when you add auto-wild here at runtime, when Spring trying to create an instance of product controller for you, he will call this set method to inject an instance of product service for you. So when using auto-wild means ask Spring, okay, to grab an instance and inject the instance to this field for you. Okay, ask for Spring to inject a field, an instance of the product service for you. That's auto-wild do. And you have three choices: constructor-based, property-based, and the setter-based. The constructor-based, this one is the best. Okay, because when using property-based dependency injection, okay, which is auto-wild due to dependency injection, it's very simple, just one line of code, but you might have a cyclic problem. Suppose, give you one example, okay, I have a class A, okay, you depend on B. Okay, you have a class B, okay, and you depend on C, and you have class C, depend on the A. All of them have a controller and the auto-wild. Okay, now when Spring try to initialize based on the code for you, it's gonna have a cyclic problem, because when Spring initialize A instance, it has to have B, right? And so it will going to initialize B. When it initialize B, it has to inject C. So it will go to initialize C. And when it going to initialize C, it will ask for A. So it will have a cyclic problem. And for the constructor-based, it will also have a similar problem, but you are more alert. Think about when using constructor-based annotation, what you're gonna do. You have to declare the fields. You have to write the constructor. You have to have the argument or variable in the constructor, right? And you have to using this start to assign the values to the fields. So you have more code to write. And when you do that, you are more alert. Okay. For the property-based, just dump in. Okay. And add auto-wild annotation. And for the setter, there's no problem, no cyclic problem, because it will create instance first, it will call the setter methods at the second. So when the time they call the setter method, all the instances are available. But for the setter-based, it has some problem, which is this one, break encapsulation. the product controller, the life cycle of product controller is maintained by Spring, right? And when you have a setter method, as a programmer, you can always inject another copy of the product service. And as we know, product controller, by default, Spring will only keep one instance, which is singleton. So when one programmer change the code setter, change the product service, all other programmers were using the same copy of the product service. So it breaks encapsulation when we're using setter-based. And when we're using setter-based, you are also write more coding. Okay, you code more. You have to create another method. And the constructor-based is the best. And if you have a constructor-based, you don't need to add the auto-while annotation. I think the changes made since Spring, probably Spring 4.3. I couldn't remember the actual version. It will also do the dependency injection for you. Okay. And another thing, keep in mind, when you do the dependency injection, make sure if the best dependency injection is no more than 5. Okay, if you have more than 5 dependency injection in one class, you should refactor, because it means you probably have a lot of responsibility covered by this one controller class. Okay. So that's the auto-while doing. Basically, is ask Spring to inject other an instance for you. Okay, and when you do the coding, suggest you to using the constructor-based dependent injection, less error prone. And for the new framework like Angular, they only has a constructor-based dependent injection. There's no property and setter because it's error prone. Okay. So hope you understand after I explain to you the auto-while annotation. And if you still have question, you can leave me a comment. Okay. And thank you for watching this video, and see you next time. Bye bye.